Welcome to Module 2, a deeper dive into strengthening partnerships, a framework for prenatal through young adulthood family engagement in Massachusetts. This is the second module. This session is a closer look at some of the specific sections within the Massachusetts Family Engagement Framework. This session will focus on the guiding principles and key elements of the framework. You'll learn about each of the sections it contains, and you can download the framework at http://www.doe.family-engagement-framework.pdf. Feel free to pause this recording and write that address down. When you're ready, just hit resume. The outcomes for this session are to give participants a high-level understanding of the framework with regards to the guiding principles. The principles guide the understanding of family engagement. We will also explore the 4 key elements that provide the backbone of the framework. Then we'll discuss the various transitions families experience and strengthening family engagement capacity. At the end of this module, participants should understand how to apply the framework principles to their own context and how to apply the framework elements to the work they do with families. Let's start by defining the framework. Merriam-Webster defines a framework as a basic conceptual structure or the skeletal or open work frame that supports a structure. The Massachusetts framework was designed with this in mind. The Massachusetts framework was designed to help organizations at the state and local levels in several sectors, including health, human services, and education. For example, the framework was designed so that a local library, shelter, community health center, early childhood program, public school, or institution of higher education could use the framework to inform and strengthen the way in which they engage families. In this way, the framework provides an aligned and coordinated approach to family engagement across all settings for families. In addition to addressing family engagement in the health, human services, and education sectors, the framework was also intended to help families, policymakers, and other interested stakeholders to strengthen their family engagement programs and practices. The framework was developed with key state and regional partners. The coalition included state-level coalition members, which included participation from 11 state agencies across the health, human services, and education secretariats. The Regional Family Engagement Coalition grew to over 500 practitioners and family members over the course of 3 years, and also represented diverse perspectives and sectors, including health, human services, and education. Practitioners on the regional coalition included health, libraries, museums, early education and care programs, home visitors, human services, school and district administrators, and higher education faculty. Over the course of 2 years, more than 500 members of the coalition participated in meetings to develop the roadmap that built on existing family engagement frameworks and integrated principles of equity and cultural responsiveness. This framework now provides an aligned approach to engaging with families. Additional research that contributed to the development of the Massachusetts framework came from the Dual Capacity Building for School Family Partnerships framework, the Parent, Family, and Community Engagement Framework for Early Childhood Systems, Strengthening Families, and the Maternal and Child Health Family Engagement Framework. 5 guiding principles form the basis of this framework. These principles provide a foundation for creating, within systems and organizations, a culture that values and thrives on family engagement. Schools and community organizations play a crucial role in establishing and strengthening shared connections with families. An intentional Adoption and implementation of these principles across health, human services, and education systems and organizations is critical to the implementation of this framework and the strengthening of family engagement practices that lead to better outcomes for children, youth, and families. The first guiding principle is that each family is unique and all families represent diverse structures. Family engagement includes genuine efforts to understand each family's beliefs, values, priorities, goals, and aspirations. In a successful partnership, families and practitioners should make joint decisions and share responsibility. For each of the guiding principles, the framework includes some examples of fundamental practices. For example, it's critical to recognize and respect the uniqueness of each family. No two families are the same. They each have their own strengths and challenges. Another fundamental practice is keeping families and youth voices and perspectives at the center of family engagement work. Engage their voices by inviting them to be a part of the conversations. Also, as we work on family engagement, it's very important to remember that we should work in partnership. Planning and implementing activities with families and youth, not for families and youth, is another fundamental practice. We've included a few fundamental practices for each of these principles, but there are many others that could be included on the list. Think about the work that you do. How do you ensure that every family is seen as unique and representative of diverse structures? What does it look like when everyone in your organization holds that belief? Think about how difficult it is to work with families when not everyone does. The second guiding principle states acknowledging and accepting the need to engage all families is essential for successful engagement of diverse families and includes recognizing the strengths that comes from their diverse backgrounds. Diversity is expressed and experienced at multiple levels, such as, but not limited to, race, religion, ethnicity, culture, language, family structures, ability, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, and education level. As you think about acknowledging and accepting the need to engage all families as an essential component for successfully engaging diverse families and honoring the strengths that come from their diverse backgrounds, you must recognize and respect how unique each family is in terms of their strengths, needs, and barriers. This means each family is in a different and unique place in terms of what they bring to the table. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, the diversity makes us all stronger as we rise to any challenges in working together. Another fundamental practice is to acknowledge the diversity within and across families within an organization, healthcare setting, school, and or the community. Just as families are all unique, the settings and organizations where we work together are unique as well, both in terms of their strengths and their challenges. Finally, it's very important to approach diversity from a strengths based perspective. A strengths based approach is the acknowledgement that every person has specific strengths and skills that contribute value, resources, and resilience to an organization. Diversity today means creating an environment where the strength of those differences can be used to increase our values in our services. Think about what that looks like in your own organization. How do you know that all the stakeholders in your work acknowledge and accept the need to engage all families and recognize their strengths? How are you working with your colleagues to approach diversity from a strengths based perspective? And what can you do if you aren't? Guiding Principle 3 states building a respectful, trusting, and reciprocal relationship is a shared responsibility of families, practitioners, organizations, and systems. This positive relationship has the individual family's strengths and assets at its center. When thinking about building a respectful, trusting, and reciprocal relationship with families, the fundamental principles recognize that this is a shared responsibility between families, practitioners, organizations, and systems. Fundamental principles include such things as embracing the philosophy that building positive, goal oriented relationships is a two-way process between everyone involved. In other words, everyone involved has an important role to play, and we need each other to be successful. Another fundamental principle is recognizing and respecting diversity within and across families, striving to establish a positive relationship with all families. Families need to feel valued and respected before they're willing to contribute to the partnership. Finally, acknowledging that for some families, due to prior experiences, trust may need to be rebuilt, and dedicating the time needed to reestablish that trusting relationship is also a fundamental principle. Some families have had incredibly negative or hurtful experiences in the past that have broken their trust. It's really hard to rebuild that trust, but it's even harder to work in partnership with someone who doesn't trust you. So, taking the time to build or rebuild trust with families is an important fundamental practice. How does your organization build respectful, trusting, reciprocal relationships with families? And if you don't now, what are some ways that you could start? The fourth guiding principle is families are their child's first and best advocate. This premier role puts families in a unique position to nurture their children's growth and development and to help practitioners become knowledgeable about their child. Families really are their child's first and best advocate, and they remain the constant in their child's life over time. As we think about the fundamental practices for this guiding principle, we have to start by recognizing families as the best champions of their children's success in all the domains of health and development. After all, they are highly invested in their child's success. Nobody wants their children to be more successful than they do. Another fundamental practice is honoring and drawing on families' wealth of knowledge, experience, and expertise. They don't come to us as a blank slate. There are lots of ways families support their children that practitioners never see. We could help them feel honored and rebuild trust by asking them about some of the strategies they use to care for their children. Finally, engaging families in all decisions made with regards to their child is a fundamental practice for guiding principle 4. After all, we wouldn't want anyone making decisions about us or our own families without being a part of that process. We need to include families just as we would want to be included ourselves. What are some of the ways your organization honors the way families advocate for their children? How do you work actively to engage families in the decisions made with regard to their child? And if you're not, what could you do to start? Guiding principle number 5 is that family engagement must be equitable. Equity is the eradication of privilege, oppression, disparities, and disadvantage. Equitable family engagement comprises intentional and meaningful engagement activities and systems for all families or groups of families, no matter what the family's level of or approach to engagement. Providing equity based opportunities for family engagement can help family members become effective advocates for their children. Equity is an integral part of this framework and actually embedded throughout. The fifth guiding principle encourages fundamental practices like addressing inequities, as well as implicit and explicit bias within individuals and organizations, policies, and systems when engaging with families. Many policies and systems are built on implicit and explicit bias, and we have to find them and eradicate them to build true, trusting, respectful partnerships with families. Another fundamental practice is integrating cultural and linguistic responsive practices, including but not limited to translation, interpretation, and partnership with cultural brokers. Cultural brokers are a great way to build trust within a community by working with members of that community to engage others. Another fundamental practice might be to value opportunities to engage with all families to learn more about them, their experiences, their culture, and their goals. That might mean attending other community events to learn more about the families in their community. Finally, another fundamental practice is to recognize the need to build and rebuild trust with families who experience inequities and bias. Trust is a necessary ingredient in any relationship, and for families who have experienced inequities and bias, trust has been broken. As you think about the work you do, how are you ensuring that the work you do with families is equitable? How do you or your staff address those inequities and bias? Now let's take a deeper look at the framework elements. Following the guiding principles, the framework then presents the four elements that provide the foundation for this work. Each element builds on the previous element. The first one is building positive relationships. The second element is promoting family well-being. The third element is promoting pathways for partnerships with families. And the fourth element is supporting child and youth development and learning. They build on the previous elements. For example, practitioners are better positioned to support family well-being, which is element two, after they've established a solid, positive relationship with families based on mutual respect and trust. Also, each element includes a set of goals to work towards, as well as example practices that cut across health, human services, and the education sectors. Underlying all of these elements is an understanding that families play the most pivotal role in this partnership, and they should decide the trajectory of the relationship. Practitioners need to meet families wherever they are and focus on their individual needs and expectations. Additionally, recognizing diversity, like cultural diversity, multilingualism, or diversity in family structures, as assets helps to foster positive and healthy partnerships with families. For each element, we will look at a short description and then a set of specific goals into which each element translates. For each goal, we'll look at examples of potential practices. Those potential practices provide just a few examples and should not be considered an exhaustive list. Practitioners should note that each of these practices should be read with the sentence starter in partnership with families and responsive to their stated needs and preferences. Further, for each element, the term child refers to children as well as youth. Trust and partnership is not the only foundation for all the other elements of this framework, but it's also essential for their successful implementation. Strong relationships focus on family strengths and work toward a goal of achieving child and family well-being and success. Building relationships is a dynamic and ongoing process to which children, families, and practitioners contribute in equal parts. Healthy relationships between children, families, and practitioners develop through a series of authentic interactions over time that are meaningful to everyone involved. Through open, ongoing, and reciprocal communication, and an intentional emphasis on family strengths, interests, passions, and needs, practitioners and families are involved in a continuous process of relationship building. Strong, positive relationships with families not only paves the way for successful family engagement, but also nurtures effective relationships within families, which in turn helps achieve development, learning, health, and well being goals for children. The framework lists three goals to support building positive relationships. The first goal is to intentionally build and sustain relationships with all families. One of the first potential practices that would help you reach that goal might include promoting environments that are welcoming, inclusive, and safe. Another practice might be to identify a family's interests and passions as a foundation for developing partnerships with them. The second goal is to build reciprocal and balanced communication with all families. One of the potential practices to build reciprocal and balanced communication might be to conduct a needs assessment with families, asking them about their preferred ways of communication and how or where they go to access information. The third goal is to collaborate with families to create or to promote connections among families. One example of a practice to meet that goal might be to identify and strengthen existing partnerships among families and then use these as a foundation for building new connections. Another way might be to create interactive opportunities for groups and events with specific focuses identified by families. You could even consider funding a peer to peer program that provides a continuum of opportunities or roles for families to engage as coaches or ambassadors. Family well being, which is comprised of safety, health, and financial security, is an important outcome for families. Well being includes, but is not limited to, having access to opportunities for educational advancement and economic mobility, physical and mental health services, housing and food assistance, and other family support services. Strong and secure families lead to healthy and thriving children who are ready for a lifetime of learning. Community engagement, an essential component of the framework, allows practitioners to assist families in achieving their well being goals. The collaboration between practitioners, children, youth, families, and community agencies helps build positive relationships. These relationships support families' progress toward their goals for themselves and their children. Community partners provide culturally and linguistically responsive services and helpful resources. Partners are available to work with families and other practitioners on such goals as family members' health, mental health, educational advancement, economic mobility, and other aspects of family well being identified by the family. Community engagement can produce long term benefits in the lives of children, youth, and family members by giving them a sense of belonging, and it plays a pivotal role in building their identity. There are three well being goals within the framework. Goal one is to employ multiple strategies to connect families with resources to enhance family well being. You could learn where families already gather in their community and bring resources, supports, programs, and practitioners to them at those locations. Another strategy might be to engage with families to develop culturally and linguistically inclusive marketing materials about community resources and services. The second goal is to encourage community members, agencies, and organizations in ways that are meaningful to families. One way to reach that goal might be to collaborate with community organizations, including libraries, to address a variety of other areas of well being, such as, but not limited to, safe and adequate housing, safety of the neighborhood and community, personal safety, overall health and healthcare, literacy development, mental health, and food security. Also, utilize tools and processes for understanding how families define community engagement. The third goal for well-being is identifying barriers to access of community organizations and services. To do this, you might design and implement opportunities to regularly listen to the voice of families, things like listening tours, coffee hours, or online social media to engage families in proactive problem solving around community engagement. Another strategy might be to engage families to identify barriers to accessing community organizations or services and to innovate creative ways to overcome them, like hiring diverse speakers of primary languages spoken in the community, or navigate with families as they seek to meet their basic needs, or ensuring that family engagement staff reflect the cultural diversity in the community. Practitioners should recognize that there are diverse and varied ways that families may engage, and that each family has its unique and individual ways of engagement that should be honored. Through positive relationships established with the family, practitioners should meet each family where they are in their level of engagement by providing a broad agency definition for engagement that's responsive to the level of engagement chosen by each family. Engaging families in decision making and sharing power implies that practitioners recognize the family's role as the prime advocate of their child. Listening openly to families' concern and seeking their perspective results in engagement of families that leads to determining solutions with families rather than for families. Promoting Pathways has 5 goals. The first goal is to partner with families in identifying and planning engagement activities. For example, one practice might be to partner with families to identify topics and locations for family and community engagement opportunities. Topics like addressing housing and food stability, identifying health and mental health needs, promoting early literacy, supporting children's social and emotional development, transitions to high school and adult life, or information or resources on drugs, sexuality, and healthy living. Another practice might be to engage families early and often in the planning process to leverage continued engagement throughout the age continuum. The second goal is to use family driven approaches to engagement. One practice to meet this goal is to create opportunities to build the capacity among families to support each other. Another practice is to reduce social isolation and promote engagement by building connections with and among culturally and socioeconomically diverse families and community organizations. The third goal is to provide opportunities for family contributions to the engagement process. Practices that would help meet this goal include providing opportunities for families to engage in home visits or to offer creative ways to engage families in various community settings, like reviewing documents or serving on committees. Goal 4 is to share power and decision making. Consider creating a culture of decision making and meeting facilitation that intentionally seeks to encourage interaction and input from diverse families to meet this goal. Another practice is to partner with families in the development of job descriptions, as well as in the interviewing and hiring process, to ensure that practitioners reflect the makeup of the community and the families served. Goal 5 is support family civic engagement efforts. To meet this goal, consider engaging with families to enhance their understanding of local, state, and national education, health and human service systems, and processes for accessing services. Another practice might be to provide support and opportunities for civic engagement on topics important to families. A primary goal of family engagement is building relationships with families that support the ongoing development, learning, health, and well being of children and youth. Once practitioners have built relationships with families, they can support families in their relationships with their children by talking with them about their child's development, learning, health, and well being. The two-way sharing of information about their child opens doors for both families and practitioners to more effectively engage with children. Welcoming families to join and observe their child in classrooms, participate in home visits, and or interact with health professionals provides them an opportunity to become a part of their child's development, learning, health, and well-being beyond home. It gives family members a chance to enhance and practice their engagement and leadership skills as well. At the same time, Engaging with families in this manner also enhances the knowledge and capacity of a practitioner to support a child's development. It's important that practitioners reflect on the accessibility, like language, time, or location, of those engagement opportunities to proactively create pathways for engagement that are responsive to the needs of families. Equally valuable is connecting families with other families and community resources to enhance learning and development. Supporting child and youth development and learning goals has three goals. Goal one is to develop a multi pronged system of information exchange among families, schools, and community organizations to enhance child, youth, and family learning and development. One practice to meet that goal is to create group get togethers for families who express a common need. Another practice is to offer specific opportunities for individual families to meet with practitioners to address a specific or particular need. Goal two is to identify collaborative development and learning opportunities among families, schools, and community organizations. Determine what families identify as learning needs in order to support them in guiding their child's learning, development, health, and well being, and being inclusive of different learning styles and abilities of families. Another practice might be to engage families and organizations to provide cross sector training. Goal three is to engage families in a process of learning and development through peer to peer interactions. You could meet that goal with practices like using peer to peer mentoring as opportunities for families to exchange information and knowledge related to supporting their child's development, learning, health, and well being. Another practice might be to partner with families to engage other families in accessing services and supports related to child development, learning, health, and well being. Now, let's take a brief look at the way the framework addresses transitions. Because transitions are so important in a child's life, the Where Do We Go From Here module does an even deeper dive into how transitions are addressed within the framework. For now, let's just explore what's covered. Transitions are vital opportunities for practitioners to engage families by offering leadership and advocacy opportunities. Practitioners can assist families to successfully navigate transitions by helping them to anticipate them and by jointly establishing transition plans. For the purpose of this framework, transitions are differentiated into four types: child, youth, and family development transitions, everyday transitions, systems transitions, and unanticipated transitions. Child, youth, and family transitions are changes in the age or developmental stage of children and youth in the family, such as when a child begins to talk or walk or when they become adolescents. Daily transitions are the changes that children, youth, and families experience pretty frequently, like moving from setting to setting or changes in schedules. Systems transitions often occur when families are navigating multiple service providing systems or when they have a change in their healthcare coverage. The least frequent type of transitions are the unanticipated transitions. Fewer families experience unanticipated transitions, which are often traumatic events like losing their housing or changes in their family structure through separations or death. The framework provides examples of the many and varied transitions that families experience. Although this framework distinguishes between different types of transitions, it's essential for practitioners to recognize the intertwined nature. A transition in any sector of the system, health, human services, or education, and experienced by any one family member could affect the entire family and the family's experience in the entire system. Strengthening capacity around family engagement goes beyond providing practitioners with resources and increasing their expertise to engage families in meaningful ways to changing mindsets and creating an organizational culture of family engagement. It involves a cultural shift from understanding family engagement as random acts of parent involvement to an intentional, ongoing, and consistent process of engaging each and every member of the family. Strengthening capacity starts with the organization's emphasis on family engagement as a fundamental priority and builds on the involvement and support of every member within the organization in family engagement activities and endeavors. There are a lot of ways that organizations can create a culture of family engagement, like having opportunities for staff and leadership to learn from one another about effective family engagement practices and adopting shared practices to strengthen agency wide capacity, or recognizing family strengths to engagement while simultaneously identifying and working to eliminate barriers. Although by no means exhaustive, the list shown here is a starting point for organizations to reflect on their current family engagement practices and to identify where strengths and gaps in practice exist. There are many, many more examples included within the framework. The framework includes a long list of resources with hyperlinks. In addition to federal and state resources, there are resources from foundations, agencies, and research organizations, books on family engagement topics, and selected resources to evaluate family engagement. The framework also has a glossary of terms and references from materials used in the development of the framework, which you may also find helpful. Thank you so much for taking the time to make a deeper dive into the Massachusetts framework. To sum up the key takeaways from this session, remember the guiding principles form the basis of the framework. Under that arch, you will find the four sequential elements that provide the foundation for the framework. Each one includes goals and sample practices. The framework also includes information about transitions, which are vital opportunities to engage families, and strengthening capacities, which includes staffing, training, and professional development, resource development, and evaluation strategies. This is just one of four modules to bring strengthening partnerships, a framework for prenatal through young adulthood family engagement in Massachusetts, to life. Additional topics include an introduction to the framework, where do we go from here with the framework, and culturally responsive family engagement. For more information on the modules and the Massachusetts framework, please contact the Massachusetts Statewide Family Engagement. Their contact information is on the screen. Thank you again for taking the time to take a deeper dive into strengthening partnerships, a framework for prenatal through young adulthood family engagement in Massachusetts.